I am Harrison, 32 years old. For 3 agonizing years, every single Friday morning like clockwork, I bled my own family dry by sending my parents $550 a week. While I was working myself into the ground, skipping lunches, and watching my wife stress over mounting grocery bills, my parents decided to simply skip my 5-year-old daughter's birthday party. When I called to ask where they were, my father snapped, "We don't count your family." He said those exact words to me while drinking expensive wine at a steakhouse across the country. But there is one thing they did not know. They did not know that I was the sole legal owner of the luxury vehicle they drove, the primary account holder for their cell phones, and the guarantor for the credit cards they swiped every single day. And right now, they are facing absolute financial ruin, desperately trying to crawl back into my life. Before I tell you exactly what happened, hit that like button if you believe in justice. And do not forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let us go back to where this entire nightmare began. I remember sitting at my cramped kitchen table. The cheap overhead light cast a sickly yellow glow over the stack of unpaid utility bills. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely type my password into my banking application. The echo of my father's voice was still ringing in my ears, bouncing around the inside of my skull like a physical weapon. "We do not count your family." Those words unraveled decades of my desperate attempts to be a good son. I looked at my laptop screen, staring blindly at the pending automatic transfer scheduled for the next morning. 3 years. 3 years of $550 disappearing from my checking account every Friday morning. I did the mental math right there at the table. Over $85,000. That money was my blood, my sweat, and my tears. It was money that should have gone toward a down payment on some decent real estate for my wife and daughter so we could finally escape this cramped apartment. It was money that should have been sitting safely in my little girl's college fund, growing with interest so she would never have to take out crushing student loans. Instead, it was gone, swallowed by a bottomless pit of parental expectation and entitlement. My wife, Clara, stood in the doorway of the kitchen. She did not say a word. She just watched me with her arms crossed over her chest. I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the exhaustion of a woman who had spent years stretching a dollar until it snapped. She had sacrificed right alongside me, putting her own dreams on hold so I could play the role of the dutiful savior. I took a deep breath, and a cold, hard resolve crystallized in my chest. I navigated to the recurring payments tab. I moved the cursor over the cancel button. I thought about my father laughing in that fancy restaurant. I clicked the button. The transfer was canceled. But I was not done. The dam had broken, and years of repressed rage came flooding out. I opened a new tab and logged into my cellular carrier website. My parents were on my family plan. I paid their bill every month without question. I navigated to device management and suspended both of their phone lines. Then, I pulled up the auto loan portal for the car I had financed for them. I initiated the legal process to revoke their authorized user status and requested the paperwork to prepare for the vehicle's repossession. Finally, I logged into the credit card company portal. It was a card I had given them strictly for medical emergencies, yet it always seemed to carry non-emergency charges at high-end department stores. I closed the account entirely. I severed every single financial thread connecting me to them. I did all of this in exactly 15 minutes. 40 minutes later, the landline phone in the kitchen rang. My mother's name flashed brightly on the caller ID. I picked up the receiver, pressing it to my ear, but I did not speak first. "Harrison, what the hell did you do?" my mother shrieked. Her voice was not just angry. It was a raw, unfiltered shriek of absolute disbelief. The sound of a parasite realizing the host had just cut off its blood supply. I kept my voice dead level, practically devoid of emotion. "I removed you from my accounts." She exploded. The sheer volume of her voice forced me to hold the phone away from my ear. She screamed about how ungrateful I was, how I was abandoning them in their old age, how that money was theirs by right. She demanded I log back in immediately and restore the transfer. The entitlement was sickening. "Tell me, Mom," I said quietly, cutting through her tirade. What exactly should I be grateful for? You fed me and put a roof over my head? That is the bare minimum you are supposed to do when you have a child. She gasped, highly offended. She started listing her sacrifices, using the same manipulative tactics she had used since I was a boy. I listened to her rant, but my eyes drifted out to the living room. My 5-year-old daughter, Maya, was sitting on the sofa. She was still wearing her favorite purple birthday dress and her sparkly shoes. Her small hands were folded in her lap. Her face was stained with dried tears. She had spent the entire afternoon running to the front window, pressing her nose against the glass, asking when Grandma and Grandpa were going to arrive. She had waited for 2 agonizing hours for people who simply did not care enough to show up. My mother kept screaming through the phone, threatening to involve the rest of the family, threatening to make my life miserable if I did not fix this. I looked at my daughter's broken heart. "You did this to yourselves," I said. "You are on your own." I hung up the phone. I thought the worst of the confrontation was over. I assumed they would just be angry from a distance. I was so incredibly wrong. They were about to unleash a war on my household, and the depths they would sink to would force me to take actions I never thought possible. To truly understand how I got to this breaking point, you have to understand the invisible debt I had been carrying my entire life. I was raised in a household where love was highly conditional. My parents treated affection like a currency that had to be earned. Good grades, athletic achievements, and absolute obedience bought a fleeting moment of praise. Anything less, any sign of independent thought or failure, was met with chilling silence and passive-aggressive disappointment. My mother, Sylvia, was a master at psychological warfare. She kept a running tally of every meal she ever cooked, every ride to school she ever gave, and every dollar she spent raising me. She made sure I felt perpetually indebted. My father, Victor, was her silent enforcer. He never raised a hand to me, but his disappointed sighs and crossed arms were far more effective. He nodded along to my mother's every decree, validating her manipulation. Then there was my older brother, Julian. Julian was the golden child. He was handsome, charismatic, and always seemed to effortlessly achieve the things I struggled for. Today, Julian lived in a massive house in Phoenix. He boasted a 6-figure salary, drove luxury cars, and acted like he was the king of the world. My parents worshipped the ground he walked on. They bragged about him to anyone who would listen. The bitter irony was that Julian never sent them a single dime. He was too successful, too important to be bothered with their financial troubles. His mere existence made them proud. My existence, on the other hand, was only valued by what I could provide. When Clara and I got married, we did not have a lavish wedding. We had a simple courthouse ceremony because we wanted to save money. My mother did not speak to me for a week because we deprived her of a party to show off to her friends. When Maya was born, we were struggling. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. I was working a grueling corporate job, grinding out 50-hour weeks, praying for a promotion just to keep our heads above water. Clara worked part-time retail shifts while raising Maya. We tracked every single penny. We bought store-brand everything at the grocery store. Date nights were a distant memory. We canceled our streaming services. We had not taken a real vacation in 3 years. Then, 2 years after Maya was born, my parents came to me with a tearful sob story. They claimed my father's hours had been drastically cut at his job. They said my mother's shifts at the local salon were drying up. They sat in my cramped living room, crying about mounting medical bills and a leaky roof. They claimed they were on the verge of losing their house. My mother wept openly, asking what they were going to do. My heart melted. I felt the crushing weight of obligation. They were my parents. They gave me life. What kind of son would I be if I let them become homeless? So I offered to help. I agreed to send them $550 every single Friday. It was a devastating financial burden for my young family. I watched my hard-earned salary vanish week after week. I picked up extra weekend gigs. Clara had to put our groceries on her high-interest credit card multiple times just so we could eat. The stress was suffocating. One evening, My coworker Greg noticed me eating instant noodles for the fourth day in a row in the break room. He made a loud, snide comment about how I lived like a broke college student despite my decent salary. I forced a laugh and changed the subject, but inside, I felt a deep, burning shame. I was failing to provide a comfortable life for my wife and daughter because I was too busy keeping my parents afloat. But the weekly cash transfers were only the beginning. A year into this arrangement, my mother called me in absolute hysterics. She claimed her back pain was severe, and she desperately needed a reliable, safe vehicle to get to her physical therapy appointments. She cried about how their old car was breaking down and how terrified she was of being stranded on the highway. Their credit was completely destroyed, so they could not secure a loan. I felt completely cornered. I took a massive hit to my own credit utilization. I co-signed a hefty auto loan, putting the title entirely in my name to secure the financing, and agreed to make the monthly payments along with everything else. I genuinely assumed they bought a sensible, safe sedan, a Honda or a Toyota. It was not until 8 months later, during a rare holiday visit, that I saw what was actually sitting in their driveway. It was a brand new Porsche Cayenne. I confronted my father about it immediately, my hands shaking with anger. He barely looked up from polishing his golf clubs. He claimed they got a spectacular deal at the dealership and that they deserved a little comfort in their old age after working so hard. I stood there, utterly paralyzed by the sheer audacity. I was paying the massive monthly installments on a luxury SUV while my own car had a check engine light that I could not afford to diagnose. But I said nothing. I swallowed my pride and my anger, terrified of the explosive, guilt-tripping argument that would follow if I demanded the car back. I justified it by telling myself it was a temporary sacrifice. I was buying the peace. Then came October. Maya's 5th birthday was just around the corner. We had been planning it for weeks. We did not have the money to rent out a big venue or hire entertainers, so we hosted it at our small apartment. Clara baked a beautiful chocolate cake from scratch with bright pink frosting, exactly what Maya had asked for. I stayed up past midnight stringing cheap streamers and blowing up balloons. Maya was practically vibrating with excitement. She had painted a special picture just for her grandparents. 2 days before the party, my Aunt Beatrice called me. Beatrice was the family peacekeeper, a woman who constantly preached about family loyalty and the importance of securing a good inheritance. She gently suggested that I wire my parents a little extra cash for gas money so they could make the drive to the party. I was already overdrawn, but I scraped together an extra $100 and sent it. I called my mother on Friday morning to confirm they were coming. She sounded warm and incredibly excited. She promised they would be there with bells on. I felt a massive wave of relief wash over me. Finally, we were going to have a normal, happy family milestone. I had paid my dues, and they were finally going to show up for my daughter. Saturday arrived bright and clear. The party officially started at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Claire's parents, Helen and George, arrived early to help us set up the snacks. They did not have much money either, living strictly off their modest retirement funds. But they brought genuine warmth and a beautiful handmade blanket for Maya. By 2:30, our tiny apartment was filled with kindergartners and their parents. The noise was joyful and chaotic. We played games. We sang songs. But Maya was distracted. She kept abandoning her friends to run to the front window. She would press her nose against the glass, looking down at the parking lot, searching for a car that was never going to pull in. "When will Grandma and Grandpa be here?" she asked me, pulling on my sleeve, her lower lip trembling just a little. I checked my phone for the 10th time. No missed calls. No text messages. I forced a bright smile. "Any minute now, sweetie. I am sure they are just running late," I choked out. 3 o'clock came and went. The kids gathered around the table to eat the chocolate cake. 4 o'clock rolled around, and the party started winding down. The other parents collected their exhausted kids, thanking us for a lovely time, and walked out the door. The apartment grew quiet, the joyful energy completely drained away. Maya sat on the couch in her purple dress. The bright pink frosting was smeared on her plate untouched. Silent tears were rolling down her small cheeks dropping onto the fabric of her dress. "They forgot about me," she whispered, her voice cracking. Those words shattered my heart into a million jagged pieces. Helen and George rushed over to comfort her, wrapping her in a tight hug. Clara shot me a look from across the room. It was not anger. It was deep, profound pity. She was watching her husband realize that his parents were monsters. After we finally put Maya to bed, I walked into our bedroom and dialed my father's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried my mother. Same result. It was not until hours later, sitting in the dark living room, that I tried one last time. My father answered on the third ring. Instantly, I heard loud laughter in the background, the distinct clink of fine glassware, the low hum of expensive restaurant ambience. "Dad, where were you today?" I demanded, my voice tight with suppressed rage. "Maya's party was today." "Oh, that was today?" he replied. He sounded distracted, utterly unbothered by my tone. "Your mom and I went to visit your brother in Phoenix. Julian has been begging us to come out, and we figured, why not?" The room started spinning. The walls of my cheap apartment felt like they were closing in. My brother Julian, the golden child. "You went to Phoenix?" I asked, my voice cracking under the weight of the betrayal. "I sent you gas money to come to your granddaughter's birthday. I called you yesterday to confirm." "Well, we can't just drop everything for every little thing, Harrison," he sighed loudly into the receiver. "We have other grandchildren, too." "Every little thing?" It was her 5th birthday. "Look, we'll make it up to her," he said dismissively. "We are actually having a wonderful time out here. Julian took us to this incredible steakhouse last night. Steaks were phenomenal. His kids are in so many activities. We're going to watch them swim tomorrow." He was actively rubbing it in. He was enjoying the fact that he chose Julian's children over mine. He was boasting about eating phenomenal steaks while I was feeding my family cheap pasta. Then the realization hit me like a physical blow. "How did you afford a flight to Phoenix?" I asked, the question bursting out before I could stop it. "We saved up," he replied defensively, his tone shifting. "Saved up?" "Saved up from the money I send you every week so you can pay your bills," I shouted. Silence stretched across the line, thick and heavy. When his voice came back, it was harder and colder than I had ever heard it. "That money is ours, Harrison. What we do with it is our business. You offered to help us, remember? We didn't force you." I lost my mind. I told him how Clara and I were buying store-brand everything, how I was working 50-hour weeks, how we had not taken a vacation in 3 years. I demanded to know why they really blew off the party. He let out a long-suffering sound that made my skin crawl. "You want the truth? Fine. Julian's family is just easier. His house is nice. His wife is pleasant. We don't have to pretend everything is okay when we are with them, because everything actually is okay." I could barely breathe. "We struggle because we send you $550 every single week." That is when someone called my father in the background, telling him to come back to the table. He rushed to get off the phone. And then he delivered the final, fatal blow. "We don't count your family the same way, Harrison. Julian's family is different, better established. You have to understand that. We don't count your family." He hung up. The line went dead. That was the exact moment the loyal, obedient son died. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Clara pulled me into a hug, and I realized I was crying. Ugly, gasping sobs. I told her everything he said. I saw the anger burning behind her eyes. Something broke inside me, but something else crystallized into solid steel. I grabbed my laptop, and that is when I canceled everything. The immediate fallout of cutting them off was brutal. My phone blew up. Julian sent me a barrage of text messages, calling me psychotic and demanding I turn the credit cards back on immediately. Cousin Felix called me, berating me for being a selfish son who only cared about money. I ignored them all. I sat in the dark living room with Clara, holding her hand, waiting for the hurricane to hit. The hurricane arrived 2 days later in the form of a thick, certified letter. I signed for it at the front door and opened it at the kitchen counter. It was from a sleazy local law firm, demanding immediate financial compensation for the Porsche. The official legal document claimed I had verbally gifted the vehicle to my parents and had no legal right to restrict their access to it or demand its return. I actually laughed. A real, bitter, echoing laugh. They were literally using the money I gave them to hire a lawyer to sue me for a car I owned. I immediately called Diana. She was an old college friend who had worked her way up to become a high-powered family law attorney. I explained the entire situation and emailed her all the documentation. The vehicle title clearly in my name, the bank statements proving I made every single monthly payment, and the insurance policies I maintained. Diana called me back within the hour. Her voice was sharp and professional. "Harrison, this is a pathetic scare tactic," she said confidently. "They have zero legal standing. The vehicle is legally yours. You made the payments. I am drafting a cease and desist letter right now. We will demand the immediate return of the vehicle, or we will report it stolen to the authorities." I gave her the green light. The cease and desist went out the next morning via overnight courier. My parents' cheap lawyer withdrew from the case almost immediately upon receiving Diana's aggressive response. They realized very quickly that they were outgunned, and more importantly, they were out of money to pay legal fees. But my mother, Sylvia, was not someone who handled defeat with grace. If she could not beat me in a legal battle, she was going to destroy my life personally and professionally. It started at my workplace. I was sitting in my cubicle, staring at my monitor, desperately trying to focus on a major quarterly report that I needed to secure a salary bump. My manager, Mr. Harrington, approached my desk. He was a strict, no-nonsense executive. He had a deeply concerned look on his face as he asked me to step into his private office. "Harrison, I just received a frantic phone call at the main reception desk from your mother," Harrington said, closing the heavy glass door behind us. "She told my receptionist that there was a massive family emergency, a life-or-death situation, and that she needed you to contact her urgently." My blood ran completely cold. I knew instantly it was a manipulation tactic. "Who is dying?" I asked, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. "She wouldn't specify," Harrington replied, watching me closely. I took a deep breath. I knew I had to be honest. I explained the situation to my boss. I told him my parents were financially abusive, that I had recently cut them off, and that this was targeted harassment. I fully expected to be reprimanded for bringing personal drama into the corporate office. Instead, Harrington looked at me with profound empathy. He immediately instructed the receptionist to block my mother's number entirely and assured me my job and my impending promotion were completely secure. I walked out of his office feeling a massive surge of gratitude, but the relief was short-lived. My cell phone vibrated violently in my pocket. It was Clara. She was crying hysterically. "You need to get to Maya's school right now," Clara sobbed into the phone. I dropped everything and ran. I broke every speed limit getting to the kindergarten. When I burst through the front doors of the school, my heart was hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. Mrs. Albright, the veteran school secretary, was standing by the front desk speaking with a uniformed police officer. Mrs. Albright pulled me aside immediately. Her face was pale. She explained that my mother had called the school main office, claiming there was a severe medical emergency and that she was on her way to pick up Maya for an urgent doctor's appointment. Sylvia had been incredibly aggressive on the phone, insisting that she had legal custody rights and demanding they have Maya waiting at the curb. Thank God for strict school security protocols. Mrs. Albright knew Clara and I were the only authorized contacts for pickup. She flatly refused to release my daughter and threatened to lock down the building and call the police if my mother showed up on the property. I felt physically sick. My stomach churned with nausea. My own mother was willing to use my innocent child as a pawn to force me into compliance. I filed an official police report right there in the school lobby and updated Maya's security file, explicitly stating that Victor and Sylvia were a direct threat and under no circumstances were they allowed near my child. That night, I drove to the hardware store and bought a high-end security camera system. I spent 3 hours installing cameras around our apartment doors and windows. We were living in a fortress, terrified of what my desperate parents would do next. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how a family could become this toxic. But the absolute worst was yet to come. Because the true reason my parents were so desperate for that $550 a week was about to be exposed. The facade was about to crack, and the truth was sicker and more twisted than I ever could have imagined. I was about to find out exactly where my money was really going, and it would change my life forever. After the terrifying incident at my daughter's kindergarten, our small 2-bedroom apartment felt less like a family home and entirely like a fortified bunker. I found myself obsessively checking the live feeds on my newly installed security camera system every 10 minutes. The slightest noise in the hallway outside our door made my heart hammer violently against my ribs. Clara completely stopped taking our 5-year-old daughter, Maya, to the local neighborhood park. We were absolutely terrified that my mother might be waiting behind a parked car or sitting on a bench in disguise, ready to snatch her. We were utterly exhausted, running on pure adrenaline, fear, and a deep, simmering anger. But underneath that fear, a cold and calculating question kept keeping me awake at night, circling my brain like a predator. How did my mother know Maya's exact school schedule? Maya's kindergarten had just recently implemented a brand new schedule involving early release days on alternating Tuesdays for teacher planning sessions. It was a completely new routine. My mother lived 3 hours away in a different county. She had not spoken to us in weeks since the explosive birthday incident. There was absolutely no logical way she could have known that Maya was supposed to be picked up at noon on that specific Tuesday, unless someone on the inside deliberately fed her that highly sensitive information. I sat at my cramped kitchen table on a quiet Sunday morning, drinking a mug of black coffee, running through the mental list of every single person who knew our new daily routine. Clara and her parents, Helen and George, were the only family members who regularly helped with our school pickups. They were completely out of the question. They despised my parents as much as I did. My corporate boss, Mr. Harrington, knew about the schedule change because I had to officially adjust my working hours to accommodate it, but he was the exact man who had just protected me from my mother's insane, harassing phone call to the office. Then it hit me with the force of a physical blow. A deeply buried memory from 2 weeks prior surfaced in my mind. I had spoken to my Aunt Beatrice. She had called me under the convenient guise of checking in on my mental health, perfectly playing her usual role of the concerned, neutral family peacemaker. During that specific phone call, she had casually asked how Clara and I were managing our childcare logistics with my intense corporate salary demands and long hours. I had mentioned the new Tuesday early release schedule in passing, completely unsuspecting of her true motives. Aunt Beatrice, the woman who constantly preached to everyone about unwavering family loyalty. The woman who obsessed over hosting perfect Thanksgiving dinners and constantly reminded everyone about the importance of staying in the family will to secure a good inheritance. She was the one who had gently pressured me to send my parents extra cash for gas money right before the birthday party. She was not a peacemaker. She was the informant. She was the family mole. I did not wait for my simmering anger to cool down. I grabbed my car keys, told Clara I would be back soon, and drove straight to Beatrice's house. She lived in a pristine, highly regulated HOA community about 40 minutes away, a neighborhood where every lawn was perfectly manicured and every house looked identical. When I pulled my beat-up car up to her immaculate driveway, the sheer hypocrisy of the entire situation made my jaw clench so hard my teeth ached. I marched up the walkway and rang her expensive brass doorbell. Beatrice answered the door wearing a floral blouse and a warm, heavily practiced smile. That fake smile vanished the exact second she saw the dead, unblinking look in my eyes. "Harrison, what a surprise. Come in. I was just making a pot of tea," she said, her voice dripping with fake, sugary sweetness. "I am not here for tea, Beatrice," I said, stepping right into her pristine foyer and intentionally refusing to take off my shoes. "I want to know exactly what you told my mother about Maya's school schedule." Her eyes darted nervously toward her perfectly decorated living room. She reached up and adjusted her pearl necklace, a classic nervous tell that she was about to lie to my face. I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about, Harrison. Your mother and I barely speak these days. The entire family is in such terrible turmoil because of your rash financial decisions. Do not lie to my face, I fired back, my voice echoing loudly off her high-vaulted ceilings. My mother tried to unlawfully remove my daughter from her kindergarten on a Tuesday, the exact Tuesday early release day I mentioned exclusively to you and nobody else in this family. You fed her my daughter's location. You actively enabled a kidnapping attempt. You are being incredibly dramatic and disrespectful, Harrison, she scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. Kidnapping? She is the child's biological grandmother. Sylvia just wanted to see her granddaughter because you are holding the poor girl hostage out of spite. Your parents are good people. You are destroying this family over money. Money that you owe them for raising you and putting a roof over your head. The absolute audacity of her words felt like a physical slap across the face. But I did not lose my temper. I did not yell. The old Harrison, the beaten-down son, would have backed down immediately, terrified of being labeled the bad guy at the next family gathering. The new Harrison simply saw a sad, deeply manipulative woman who was entirely complicit in decades of emotional abuse. I do not owe them a single dime, I said, my voice dropping to a low, highly dangerous register. And I certainly do not owe you any explanations about my life. But I want to make one thing perfectly clear to you right now. If you ever speak to my mother about my wife, my daughter, or my personal schedule ever again, I will have my lawyer serve you with a restraining order for aiding in the targeted harassment of a minor. I will drag you into a courtroom. You are completely dead to me, Beatrice. Enjoy your tea. I turned around and walked out the front door, completely ignoring her sudden, panicked sputtering about respecting my elders and ruining the family reputation. I got into my car and drove away, feeling a massive, suffocating weight lift off my shoulders. I was surgically cutting the rot out of my life, piece by piece, and it felt incredibly empowering. When I finally got back home, I sat Clara down and told her exactly what happened. She hugged me tight, fiercely proud of the firm boundaries I was finally setting to protect our household. I genuinely thought the worst of the family drama was finally isolated and contained. I had blocked my parents on every platform, cut off my brother Julian entirely, and banished the family mole. I was ready to move on and rebuild our lives in peace. But the universe had one more massive, earth-shattering revelation waiting for me. Later that evening, my cell phone buzzed loudly on the kitchen counter. It was an unknown number with an Arizona area code. I almost hit the decline button, fully assuming it was Julian calling from a burner phone to scream at me again about the canceled credit cards. But a strange gut feeling told me to answer the call. "Hello," I said cautiously, bracing for an argument. "Harrison? It is Nora," a quiet, highly strained voice replied. Nora was Julian's wife. We had always been cordial at family events, but we were never truly close. She always seemed perfectly polished, playing the role of the ideal corporate wife living the ultimate American dream in Phoenix. But right now, she sounded completely exhausted, as if she had not slept in weeks. "Nora? Is everything okay?" I asked, my guard slowly coming down. "No, Harrison. Nothing is okay." She let out a long, shaky breath. "Julian does not know I am calling you. He would absolutely lose his mind and punish me if he found out. But I cannot sit here in this massive house and watch this happen to you anymore. I heard all about the birthday party. I heard about what your parents did to Maya. And I know you finally cut off their weekly money." I braced myself for yet another lecture about family duty and forgiveness. "If you are calling to convince me to start paying them again, you are completely wasting your time, Nora." "God, no." Nora let out a bitter, incredibly humorless laugh. "I am calling because you need to know the actual truth. You need to know exactly where your $550 a week was actually going. Harrison, your parents were not paying their mortgage. They were paying ours." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned completely white. Clara saw all the color drain from my face and immediately walked over, pressing her ear close to the phone so she could hear the conversation. "What do you mean they were paying your mortgage?" I asked, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Nora started pouring out the ugly truth, and every single word she spoke systematically dismantled the grand, perfect illusion my parents had built. Julian, the undisputed golden child, the wealthy executive living in a sprawling Phoenix estate, was completely and utterly broke. Julian's company downsized 3 years ago, Nora explained, her voice cracking with years of suppressed anxiety and resentment. He lost his high-paying executive position. He was way too proud and arrogant to take a pay cut somewhere else, so he tried to start his own independent consulting firm. It failed miserably within 6 months. But he flatly refused to downsize our lavish lifestyle. He refused to let your parents know he was struggling, because his entire identity is built entirely on being their perfect, highly successful son. I did the mental math in my head. 3 years ago, that was the exact timeline. That was the exact month my parents came to my apartment, crying real tears about my father's hours being drastically cut and my mother's salon shifts drying up completely. He maxed out all of our joint credit cards, Nora continued, the words spilling out like a confession. We were drowning in massive homeowners association fees. We were 3 full months behind on the mortgage. The bank was threatening foreclosure. Julian finally broke down and begged your parents for a massive financial bailout. He told them he would lose the house, the luxury cars, everything. He told them they would be deeply embarrassed in front of their country club friends if their golden boy went bankrupt. So my parents came to me, I stated, the sickening, twisted reality washing over me in heavy waves. Yes, Nora said, her voice filled with deep shame. Your parents did not have the cash on hand to save him, so they maliciously invented the story about their own financial ruin. They squeezed you for $550 a week. Harrison, if you do the math, that is roughly $2,200 a month. That is the exact monthly amount of our underwater mortgage and our HOA dues. You have been personally funding Julian's fake millionaire lifestyle for 3 long years. Your parents gladly sacrificed your young family's well-being just to protect Julian's fragile ego. I felt physically ill. My vision actually blurred around the edges. I thought about the days I ate cheap instant noodles for lunch so I could afford the transfer. I thought about Clara standing at the grocery store checkout lane, forced to put our basic food necessities on a high-interest credit card. I thought about my innocent daughter wearing cheap, second-hand clothes while I drained my checking account to save my parents from a fake eviction. They were never homeless. They were taking my hard-earned money and secretly wiring it directly to Julian so he could keep up appearances. They intentionally forced my family into poverty to subsidize my brother's disgusting luxury. What about the Porsche? I demanded, my voice shaking with a rage so profound it felt like ice in my veins. The luxury car I financed for them? Julian convinced them they needed to look highly successful too, Nora admitted softly. He told them that if they drove a cheap, sensible car, their friends would ask questions. He wanted them to project the image of wealthy parents visiting their wealthy son. I am so incredibly sorry, Harrison. I wanted to tell you the truth for years, but Julian threatened me. He said he would file a malicious lawsuit, force a messy divorce, and drag me through a brutal custody battle to take the kids away from me if I ever exposed his secret to you. But since you cut the money off, we are losing the house anyway. The final foreclosure notices arrived yesterday. I am entirely done covering for him. I thanked Nora profusely for risking everything to tell me the truth. I hung up the phone and looked at Clara. She was crying, not out of sadness, but out of pure, unadulterated fury on my behalf. We had been systematically robbed. We had been financially and emotionally violated by the very people who were supposed to protect us. I did not scream. I did not throw plates against the wall. I walked calmly over to my laptop and formulated a plan to execute the most satisfying, brutal confrontation of my entire life. I knew for a fact that Julian and my parents had a standing weekly video call every Sunday evening to discuss their fabricated, perfect lives and praise each other. I still had the administrative login credentials to my parents' video conferencing account because I was the one who set it up and paid the subscription fee for them years ago. Sunday at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, I logged into the meeting room as the host. The screen popped up, showing my parents sitting in their living room looking incredibly stressed and panicked, and Julian sitting in his lavish, fake home office in Phoenix. The exact moment my face appeared on the grid on their screens, the silence was absolutely deafening. "Harrison?" my father barked, his face immediately flushing dark red with anger. "How dare you hack into this call after what you did to us? We have absolutely nothing to say to you unless you are calling to grovel, apologize, and restore our bank accounts." Julian sneered into his expensive webcam. "Look who finally decided to show his face. You realize you are putting mom and dad on the streets, right? You are a pathetic, selfish excuse for a son." I smiled at the camera. It was not a happy smile. It was the terrifying smile of an executioner pulling the lever. "I am not putting them on the streets, Julian," I said smoothly, leaning back in my office chair. "I am just stopping the payments on your mortgage. $2,200 a month, right? That is the exact amount of your underwater mortgage and your overdue HOA fees." Julian's face went completely sheet white. The arrogant sneer vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. My parents froze in their living room. My mother's mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish suffocating on dry land. "What are you talking about?" my father stammered weakly, desperately attempting to maintain the lie. "I spoke to Nora," I said, dropping the bomb with absolute surgical precision. "I know everything. I know all about the failed consulting firm. I know about the maxed-out credit cards. I know that you lied straight to my face, manipulated my deepest emotions, and stole money from my wife and child for 3 years to fund a fake millionaire lifestyle for your precious golden boy. Harrison, listen to me. You do not understand the corporate pressure." Julian started speaking rapidly, his hands visibly shaking on camera. "Shut up, Julian," I commanded, my voice slicing through his pathetic excuses like a razor. "I am the one who wore thrift store clothes while you bought expensive steaks. I am the one who worked 50 brutal hours a week while you played pretend executive in your home office. And you," I pointed directly at the camera showing my parents, "you skipped my daughter's birthday party to go worship the son who is actively bleeding you dry. You stole from my daughter's future college fund to pay for his country club image. We are your parents," my mother finally screamed, the sheer panic breaking through her carefully constructed facade. "Julian needed us. You were doing fine. You always managed to scrape by. Julian is different. He has a certain standard of living to maintain." She actually said it out loud. She admitted on camera that my family's suffering was a perfectly acceptable price to pay for Julian's comfort. "You are absolutely right, Mom," I said, my voice completely devoid of any remaining affection or pity. "I do manage to scrape by, but I will not be doing it for you ever again. Julian is your problem now. Let us see exactly how much he loves you when you do not have my stolen money to hand over to him. You do not count my family? Well, enjoy your golden child. Because you are officially dead to me." I hit the end call button. I slammed the laptop shut. The silence in our apartment was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The war was officially over and I had won. The total collapse of my parents' and Julian's perfectly curated world happened with a stunning, ruthless speed. Without my weekly influx of cash to artificially prop up their grand illusion, their entire financial house of cards instantly disintegrated into dust. Within 2 short months, the bank officially moved forward with the foreclosure on Julian's massive Phoenix estate. Nora made good on her promise. She hired a ruthless family lawyer, filed for divorce, took primary physical custody of their 2 children, and moved back across the country to live with her own parents. The judge awarded her half of whatever minimal assets were left and rightfully left Julian drowning in a mountain of unsecured credit card debt and legal fees. My parents did not fare any better. Because they had foolishly diverted all of their own meager retirement savings and my weekly payments directly to Julian, they truly had absolutely nothing left to fall back on. Their credit scores were completely destroyed. They could not even afford their own basic mortgage payments. For months after the infamous birthday party incident, they officially filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It was a matter of public record. Diana, my attorney friend, found the court filings and emailed them to me. Seeing their names officially listed as insolvent debtors brought me a profound, undeniable sense of closure. It was absolute legal proof that my money had never actually been helping them survive. It had only been enabling their toxic delusion. The bank finally located the Porsche Cayenne. Because I had officially reported that the authorized users were maliciously refusing to return my property, a repo company tracked the vehicle down to a local grocery store parking lot. They hooked it up and towed it right in front of my screaming mother, much to the amusement of the onlookers. I gladly surrendered the vehicle back to the original dealership and paid a moderate penalty fee out of my own pocket just to have the loan completely wiped from my credit profile. It was worth every single penny to permanently cut that heavy iron chain from my neck. With no house and no car, my parents had absolutely no choice but to pack their remaining belongings into garbage bags and move in with Julian. Julian had managed to secure a tiny, incredibly depressing two-bedroom apartment in a rundown part of Phoenix. The poetic justice of the entire situation was almost overwhelming. For years, they had constantly bragged to me about how easy and pleasant Julian's family was, how they could relax and enjoy the luxury without pretending. Now, they were permanently crammed into a tiny, claustrophobic apartment with a son who was spiraling into a deep, bitter depression, surrounded every single day by the crushing reality of their collective failures. I heard all about the miserable fallout through the extended family grapevine. My mother constantly complained to anyone who would listen about the lack of space and viciously criticized Julian for losing his beautiful wife. Julian, in turn, constantly blamed my parents for raising him with unrealistic expectations and spoiling him. The golden child and his devoted worshippers were finally trapped together in a miserable cage of their own making, tearing each other apart. 6 months later, I received a phone call from a blocked number while I was sitting in my office. I answered it, fully expecting a spam call or a telemarketer. "Harrison, please do not hang up." It was Julian. His voice entirely lacked the arrogant, booming confidence he had always carried. He sounded incredibly small, exhausted, and utterly desperate. "What do you want, Julian?" I asked, swiveling in my office chair and looking out the window at the bright afternoon sun. "I need your help," he begged, his voice cracking pathetically. "Mom and Dad are driving me absolutely insane. Mom cries all day long and complains about the smell of the apartment. Dad just sits in front of the television refusing to look for a job. I cannot afford to feed 3 full-grown adults on a basic entry-level salary. I am drowning here, Harrison. You have to take them in, just for a few months until I get back on my feet. Please, you have to help our family." He actually used the word family. He was desperately attempting to weaponize the exact same sense of obligation they had all used to drain me dry for years. But I was completely immune to the poison now. "Take them in?" I asked, letting a short, incredibly dry laugh escape my lips. "Julian, you have a college degree and 2 working hands. You are the highly successful, better established brother, remember? You are the golden child. You take care of them." "Harrison, please, I have absolutely nothing left," he sobbed into the phone. I leaned forward, feeling a deep, unshakable sense of absolute peace settle over my soul. "You know, Julian, my father told me something very important on the day of my daughter's 5th birthday. He told me that my family did not count the same way yours did. He told me your family was better established and easier to love. You have to understand, Julian, we don't count your family." I did not wait for his response. I did not want to hear him cry. I calmly hung up the phone. I opened my cellular carrier app and permanently blocked the number. That was the last time I ever heard my brother's voice. I felt absolutely zero guilt. They had enthusiastically dug their own grave, and I was not going to throw myself in just to cushion their fall. Healing from decades of systemic emotional manipulation is never a sudden, magical process. It is a slow, incredibly deliberate rewiring of your own brain. Even after I cut them off completely and watched their empire crumble, There were still bad days when the heavy ghost of guilt would try to creep back into my mind. I would pass a couple of senior citizens at the grocery store struggling to load their car with groceries, and a sudden, sharp spike of anxiety would hit me. I would catch myself wondering if my parents had enough food to eat or if they were warm enough in that cheap apartment. Clara recognized the destructive pattern immediately. She gently but firmly suggested I speak to a professional before the guilt consumed me again. I found a brilliant therapist named Dr. Wallace, a man who specialized specifically in toxic family dynamics, narcissistic abuse, and trauma bonds. During our intense weekly sessions, Dr. Wallace helped me methodically dismantle the deeply ingrained lie that my worth as a human being was tied solely to my financial usefulness to my parents. You were heavily conditioned from a very young age to manage your parents' emotional and financial stability, Dr. Wallace explained during one of our biggest breakthroughs. They essentially trained you to be their permanent safety net. Recognizing that their poor choices are not your responsibility is not an act of cruelty, Harrison. It is an act of supreme self-preservation. You cannot set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. Those words became my daily armor. I finally realized that fiercely protecting my wife and daughter from that generational toxicity was the most honorable thing I could ever do as a father and a husband. Financially, our lives transformed almost overnight. Without the massive, crushing burden of sending away $2,200 every single month, Clara and I finally had room to actually breathe. We stopped checking the bank account balance in a panic before buying a simple gallon of milk. I maximized my contributions to my corporate 401k retirement plan. We opened a high-yield college fund for Maya and funded it aggressively, ensuring she would never know the stress of financial instability. At work, the intense, grinding stress I used to carry vanished completely. I was much more focused, much more present, and significantly more confident in my abilities. 3 months after the entire ordeal ended, Mr. Harrington called me into his spacious office and officially offered me the senior management promotion I had been working toward for years. The salary bump was substantial, a validation of my hard work that had nothing to do with my parents. One evening, Clara sat down next to me on the couch with a bright, incredibly beautiful smile illuminating her face. She handed me a glossy real estate brochure. It was a listing for a stunning 3-bedroom house in a quiet, highly sought-after suburban neighborhood. It featured hardwood floors, a modern kitchen, and a massive, fenced-in backyard with a large oak tree that was absolutely perfect for a swing set. "We have the full down payment, Harrison," she said softly, her eyes shining with happy, relieved tears. "We can actually afford this without struggling. We can finally go home." We closed on the house 2 months later. Moving our boxes out of that cramped, depressing apartment felt like shedding an old, suffocating skin. We painted Maya's new bedroom a bright, vibrant purple and stuck glowing stars all over her ceiling. We bought a large, beautiful dining room table so we could proudly host Clara's parents for proper Thanksgiving dinners, surrounded only by people who actually loved us without any hidden agendas or running tallies. Exactly 1 year after the nightmare began, it was time for Maya's 6th birthday party. We hosted it in our new, spacious backyard. The weather was absolutely perfect, warm with a gentle breeze. We invited 20 kids from her new elementary school. Clara and her mother, Helen, spent the entire morning baking an enormous, 3-tier chocolate cake. Maya ran across the lush green grass in a bright rainbow dress, laughing so hard with her friends that she got the hiccups. She did not spend a single second looking at the front gate. She did not ask about my parents once. They were completely erased from her story, replaced by the overwhelming love, joy, and presence of people who actually showed up for her. Later that evening, after all the guests had gone home and Maya was sound asleep in her new room, Clara and I sat on our back porch. The neighborhood was peaceful and quiet. The stars were out, shining brightly over our new life. Clara rested her head gently on my shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly into the night. "Do you ever regret walking away from them?" I looked at the beautiful house we had bought with the money they had maliciously tried to steal from us. I thought about the absolute peace in my daughter's eyes when she blew out her candles. No, I said firmly, wrapping my arms securely around her waist. I only regret that it took me 32 years to realize I deserved better. I had lost the people who gave me life, but I had saved the people who gave my life meaning. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever felt that crushing weight of obligation or had to make a tough choice for your own family's well-being? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.